The scratch of the pen echoed like a gunshot in the silent, opulent dining room of the Sterling estate. The Montgomerys watched with a predatory glee, their crystal flutes raised in a silent toast to their own cruelty. They believed they had finally won. They believed they were finally ridding themselves of the social climber, a waitress who never belonged in their prestigious Hamptons world. As Elena signed the divorce papers on Christmas Eve, her tears blurred the ink on the flawless parchment. Her husband, Mark, couldn't even bring himself to look her in the eye. But as the ink dried, they had no idea of the catastrophic mistake they had just made. They didn't know that the poor girl they were casting out into the freezing snow was actually the sole heiress to the Vanderbilt empire, and by the time they realized it, it would cost them absolutely everything. The chandelier hanging above the mahogany table cost more than the house Elena had grown up in, or at least the house she told Mark she had grown up in. Its crystals cast fractured rainbows across the pristine, white tablecloth, but there was no warmth in that light. Elena smoothed the hem of her navy blue dress. It was modest, elegant, and bought from a department store, a stark contrast to the designer labels worn by her mother-in-law, Beatrice, and her sister-in-law, Carla. To them, she looked like a rag. "Pass the salt, dear," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with that blend of politeness and venom she had perfected over 60 years. "If you can reach it, that is. I know you're used to much smaller tables, crowded booths in some greasy diner, wasn't it?" Carla snickered, sipping her vintage Bordeaux. "Mom, don't be rude. Elena was a server, not a customer. She's used to standing beside the table, not sitting at it." Elena felt the familiar sting of humiliation rise to her cheeks. She looked at Mark at the head of the table, her husband of 2 years, the man who had made her fall in love in a small New York coffee shop, promising her that his family's wealth didn't define him. Mark stared at his plate, carving the roast turkey with surgical precision. He didn't look up. He didn't defend her. "I'm just happy to be here," Elena said softly, her voice trembling. "It's Christmas. I just wanted us to have a nice dinner." "A nice dinner requires good company," Beatrice whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. She turned her gaze to her son. "Mark, honey, have you told her yet? Or must we pretend to enjoy this farce until dessert?" Elena's heart skipped a beat. Her fork clattered against the fine china, making Mark flinch. "Tell me what?" Elena asked, looking between them. The atmosphere in the room shifted from passive-aggressive coldness to a sharp, predatory silence. Mark finally looked up. His eyes, usually warm, looked dull and exhausted. He looked like a man bullied into submission, but there was also a hardness, a resolve that terrified her. "Elena," Mark began, clearing his throat. "You know things haven't been working. We've had arguments," Elena pleaded, reaching her hand across the table for his. He pulled his hand back before she could touch him. "Every couple argues, Mark. It's just the stress of the holidays." "It's not the stress, Elena," Carla interjected, slamming her glass down. "It's you. You don't fit in. You never have. Look at you, wearing polyester to a Montgomery Christmas dinner. You don't know which fork to use. You embarrass him." "Carla, enough," Mark said, but there was no strength in his rebuke. He reached under his chair and pulled out a large manila envelope. It wasn't wrapped in red paper or tied with a gold bow. It was austere, legal, and terrifying. "My mother and I have been talking," Mark said, his voice devoid of emotion, reciting a script clearly forced upon him. "Regarding the future of the Montgomery Group and my image. We are merging with the Blackwood holding firm next month. I need a partner who understands this world, who brings something to the table besides." He gestured vaguely toward her. "Bills!" Elena felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. "Bills, Mark? I pay my own way. I work at the library. Pocket change, Beatrice scoffed. You are a liability, Elena. A social anchor dragging my son to the bottom of the ocean. Mark slid the envelope across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of her plate. I want a divorce, Elena, Mark said. It's over. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the grand hearth behind them. Elena stared at the envelope. On Christmas Eve, she whispered. You're doing this on Christmas Eve. The best time for a fresh start, Beatrice said, cutting a piece of meat. Consider it a gift. We're being generous. There's a check for $10,000 in there, enough for you to go back to whatever neighborhood you crawled out of. Elena looked at Mark, searching for the man who had once kissed her in the rain, who had sworn he loved her simplicity. Mark, she said, her voice breaking, is this really what you want? For $10,000, you're throwing away 2 years of marriage? Mark looked at his mother, then his sister. They were watching him like hawks. He adjusted his tie. Take the money, Elena. Sign the papers. Don't make a scene. It's the best you're going to get. Elena's hands shook so much she could barely open the envelope. Inside were 3 copies of a divorce agreement. It was standard, cold, and brutal. Irreconcilable differences. Waiver of spousal support. Lump sum payment. $10,000. She felt a vibration in her dress pocket. It was her phone. She knew who it was. It was the only person who called her at this hour on Christmas Eve. Dad. She ignored it. She couldn't let them hear. Not now. Well, Beatrice snapped. The ink won't dry itself. We have guests arriving for cocktails at 8. I want you gone by then. Elena looked around the room. This estate, with its 12 bedrooms and 6 baths, had never been a home. It had been a museum where she was the unwanted exhibit. She thought about the secret she had kept for 2 years. When she met Mark, she wanted to be loved for herself, not the Vanderbilt name. She wanted to know a man would choose Elena, the girl who loved old books and rainy days. Not Elena Vanderbilt, the daughter of Arthur Vanderbilt, the man who owned half the real estate between New York and Chicago. She had tested Mark. She had played the part of the poor orphan, and for a while, he had passed. But the poison of the Montgomery elitism had seeped into his veins. He had failed the test. A strange calm washed over her. The tears kept falling, hot and stinging, but her heart was hardening into something like the diamond Mark had refused to buy her. You think I want your money? Elena said in a low voice. We know you do, Carla laughed. Why else would you stay where you aren't wanted? And you? Elena looked at Mark. You think I'm an anchor? You think I have nothing to offer? Be realistic, Elena. Mark sighed, pulling a fountain pen from his jacket pocket, a Mont Blanc she had saved for 6 months to buy him for his birthday last year. He slid it toward her. You're a nice girl, but you're just not one of us. No, Elena said, picking up the pen. The weight was familiar. I am certainly not one of you. She turned to the last page. Signature of petitioner, Mark Montgomery. Signature of respondent. She didn't hesitate. She didn't read the fine print. She didn't argue for more money. She simply signed her name, Elena Montgomery. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. She placed it on the table next to the signed papers. I bought you a Christmas present, Mark, she said, her voice steady. I was going to give it to you later, but since I'm leaving, Carla rolled her eyes. Oh, God, what is it? A knitted coaster? A book of coupons for back rubs? Mark stared at the velvet box. He didn't touch it. Elena stood up. The chair screeched loudly against the floor. She looked at Beatrice, then Carla, and finally fixed her gaze on Mark. "You can keep the $10,000, she said. "I don't need it." "Don't play the martyr," Beatrice spat. "You have nothing." "I have my dignity," Elena said, "and as of this moment, I have my freedom." She turned and walked toward the massive oak doors of the dining room. "Wait!" Mark called out, a flash of guilt crossing his face. "Where will you go? It's snowing. It's 10 degrees out there." "Don't worry about me, Mark," Elena said, without turning back. "I'm going home." "Home?" Carla laughed shrilly. "To what? A cardboard box?" Elena pushed open the heavy front door. A gust of freezing wind blew into the foyer, swirling snow across the marble entry. She stepped out into the dark, cold night as the heavy door slammed behind her, muffling the sound of the Montgomerys' laughter. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She hit redial. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking as the cold air hit her lungs. A deep, authoritative voice answered instantly, a voice that made CEOs tremble and moved financial markets. "Elena, why are you whispering? Are you okay? I've been waiting for your call. The jet is ready on the private strip, but you said you were staying with him." Elena looked back at the Montgomery estate, glowing with golden light, looming like a beast in the night. "No, Dad," she said, wiping her tears. "I'm not staying. I'm done. Come get me." "Did he hurt you?" The voice on the phone dropped an octave, turning dangerous. Arthur Vanderbilt was protective of only one thing in this world. "He broke my heart," Elena whispered. "But that's not the worst part." "What is?" "He thinks I'm a nobody." There was a pause on the line. Then, Arthur Vanderbilt let out a low, dark chuckle. "Well, my darling, it seems we have some business to attend to. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And Elena..." "Yes?" "Dry your eyes. Vanderbilts don't cry over spilt milk. We buy the dairy and shut it down." As Elena stood in the snow at the end of the long driveway, headlights cut through the darkness. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't an Uber. It was a convoy of 3 black Cadillac Escalades, followed by a sleek, silver Rolls-Royce Phantom. The lead car bore the crest of Vanderbilt Global. Inside the house, Mark finally reached out and opened the velvet box Elena had left. Beatrice leaned in. "So, what piece of junk did she leave you?" Mark stared at the inside of the box, all the blood draining from his face. It wasn't a watch. It wasn't a ring. Inside the box was a positive pregnancy test, and tucked beneath it was a small note in Elena's elegant handwriting. "You said I brought nothing to the table. I was bringing you a son. Merry Christmas, Mark." Mark dropped the box. The plastic test clattered against the fine china. "What is it?" Beatrice demanded. "She's pregnant," Mark whispered, horror dawning on him. "I just divorced my pregnant wife in the middle of a blizzard." Outside, the door of the Rolls-Royce opened, and a man in a tuxedo stepped out into the snow holding a massive umbrella. He bowed deeply to Elena. "Miss Vanderbilt," the driver said, "your father is waiting." The game had only just begun. The wind howled, whipping Elena's hair across her face, stinging her tear-streaked cheeks. But the moment the door to the silver Rolls-Royce opened, the cold vanished. Warmth radiated from the vehicle, smelling of expensive leather and antique mahogany. Arthur Vanderbilt stepped out. At 65, he was a towering figure. He wore a cashmere overcoat that cost more than the Montgomerys' annual country club membership. His hair was silver, his eyes a piercing steel blue, the same eyes Elena had. He didn't look like a doting father in that moment. He looked like a warlord inspecting a battlefield. He stepped toward Elena and pulled her into a crushing embrace. "I've got you," he roared against her hair, I've got you, Eli. Elena slumped against him, the strength finally leaving her legs. I tried, Dad. I really did. I know, Arthur said, his voice tight. You have a heart too big for this world, and certainly too big for these insects. He looked toward the Montgomery mansion. Through the sheer curtains of the dining room window, he could see silhouettes moving. Did they hurt you? They humiliated me, Elena sobbed. They made me sign papers. They gave me $10,000 to go away. Arthur snorted, a sound like a gunshot. 10,000. I tipped my caddy more than that. The driver, a burly man named Silas, who had been Arthur's head of security for 20 years, held the umbrella over them. Sir, we should get her inside. It's freezing. Arthur nodded and guided Elena into the back of the Rolls-Royce. The interior was a sanctuary. The seats were heated. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. As Silas pulled the car into gear, the front door of the Montgomery house flew open. Mark stumbled out onto the porch, breathless. He held the velvet box in one hand and the pregnancy test in the other. He squinted into the darkness, his eyes adjusting to the glow of the taillights. He saw the convoy, 3 black Escalades flanking a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom. Mark froze. He blinked, thinking the wine was playing tricks on him. Why would a diplomatic-level security detail be picking up his waitress ex-wife? Elena! He screamed, but the wind tore the name from his lips. Inside the Rolls, Elena saw him through the tinted glass. He looked small, pathetic. Do you want me to stop? Arthur asked, his hand hovering over the intercom button. I can have Silas go back there and explain the situation physically, if you'd prefer. Elena watched Mark shivering on the porch. A part of her, the part that had loved him, wanted to roll down the window and scream at him. But the part of her that was a Vanderbilt, the part that had been dormant for 2 years, woke up. No, Dad, Elena said, turning her head away. Drive. The convoy slid away down the driveway, leaving Mark Montgomery alone in the snow, clutching a piece of plastic that proved he was going to be a father, watching a ghost disappear into the night. Inside the car, the air was heavy. Arthur poured a glass of water for Elena. There's more, Elena said, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. You need to know. Arthur looked at her hand. His eyes widened. The billionaire who had negotiated treaties and hostile takeovers suddenly looked terrified. Eli, are you? You're going to be a grandfather, she whispered. Arthur Vanderbilt leaned back, the air leaving his lungs in a huff. A slow, genuine smile worked its way across his stony expression. A baby, he murmured. A Vanderbilt heir. Then his expression darkened, shifting instantly from grandfather back to protector. He knows. I left him the test, Elena said. It was my parting gift. Arthur nodded slowly. Good. Let him suffer with that knowledge. But he will never see this child. He signed away his rights when he signed those papers. He kicked you out. He abandoned his family. Arthur pulled out his phone, a sleek encrypted device. He dialed a number. Eduardo. It's Arthur. Wake up the legal team. Yes, all of them. I want the best divorce attorneys in New York and D.C. on a video call in an hour. My daughter is coming home. And Eduardo, open a file on the Montgomery Group. I want to know their assets, their debts, their shareholders, and their blood types. I want to know what they eat for breakfast. He hung up and looked at Elena. Rest now, darling. Tomorrow morning, the world will be different. You walked into that house as a waitress. You're walking out as the queen on the chessboard. Mark Montgomery woke up with a pounding headache. For a second, he thought it was just the hangover from the vintage Bordeaux. Then he rolled over and saw the empty side of the bed. The sheets were cold. The memory crashed down on him. The dinner, the papers, the box, the baby. He sat up, panic gripping his chest. He fumbled for his phone on the nightstand. He had tried to call Elena 10 times last night, hitting voicemail every time. He tried again. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Mark stared at the screen. In less than 12 hours, she had vanished. He threw on a robe and hurried downstairs. The house was quiet, except for the clink of china in the breakfast nook. Beatrice and Carla were already there, looking fresh and unbothered. Beatrice was reading the Wall Street Journal. Carla was scrolling through Instagram. "Sit down, Mark," Beatrice said, without looking up. "Eat something. You look terrible." "Her phone is disconnected," Mark said, pacing nervously. "Mom, she's pregnant. We kicked a pregnant woman out into a blizzard." "She claims she's pregnant," Beatrice corrected, sipping her tea. "For all we know, it's a stunt. A desperate attempt to claw her way back into the estate." "I saw the test, Mom. It was positive." "Tests can be faked," Carla chimed in, biting into a croissant. "You can buy positive tests online for $20. It's the classic gold digger move." Mark ran a hand through his hair. "But what if it's true? That's my child." Beatrice finally set down the paper. She looked at her son with a mix of pity and annoyance. "Mark, listen to me. Even if there is a child, do you really want Elena raising it? She has no money, no education, no connections. If the child exists, we will sue for full custody. We have the Montgomery name. We have the best lawyers. She has $10,000 in a sob story. No judge is going to give her that baby." Mark stopped pacing. "Take the baby from her?" "Of course," Beatrice said smoothly. "We will raise the child properly. Boarding schools, etiquette lessons, Ivy League. We'll save that child from a life of mediocrity. But first we need to focus. The Blackwood merger meeting is today." "The merger," Mark muttered. "Right. This deal will triple our net worth, Mark," Beatrice said, her eyes gleaming. "The Blackwood Group acts on behalf of a silent investor, Titan Holdings. They're looking to acquire a mid-sized firm with family values and tradition. That's us. If we close this deal, we enter the Billionaire's Club. Don't let a sniveling waitress ruin this for us." Mark took a deep breath. His mother was right. Money fixed everything. If Elena really had the baby, he could just buy his way out of the guilt. He could pay her off, keep the kid, and move on. "Fine," Mark said, straightening up. "Fine. Let's get ready. What time is the meeting?" 10 o'clock at the Blackwood headquarters in Manhattan. Meanwhile, 60 miles away, in the penthouse suite of Vanderbilt Tower overlooking Central Park, Elena woke up in a bed of Egyptian cotton. She wasn't in a guest room. She was in her old suite, the one her father had kept untouched for 2 years. She sat up. No dread in her stomach today. Only a cold, hard clarity. The door opened, and a team of 3 women walked in. They weren't maids. They were stylists. "Good morning, Miss Vanderbilt," the lead stylist, a French woman named Celine, said. "Your father requested we prepare you for a business meeting. He said, 'Dress her to kill.'" Elena slid out of bed. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below her, New York City looked like a pulsing circuit of energy. "What meeting?" Elena asked. "He said you'll be attending the preliminary acquisition," Celine said, wheeling in a rack of clothes. "He said you are the new interim CEO of Titan Holdings, Elena." She froze. Titan Holdings. She knew her father's shell companies. Titan was the entity buying the Montgomery Group. A slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "I see," Elena said. She turned to the rack. Gone were the polyester department store clothes. Gone were the modest flats. Hanging there were suits by Chanel, Armani, and McQueen. "No," Elena said, pushing aside a navy blue suit. "Not blue. Mark likes blue. He thinks it makes me look soft." She reached toward the back and pulled out a deep crimson power suit. It was sharp, tailored, and aggressive. "This one," she said. An hour later, Elena looked at herself in the mirror. The girl who had cried over a roast turkey was gone. In her place was Elena Vanderbilt. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. Her makeup was flawless, emphasizing her sharp cheekbones and icy eyes. The red suit screamed power. The diamond screamed wealth. She walked into the living room where Arthur was waiting. He was drinking an espresso and reading a briefing. He looked up, and pride swelled in his chest. "You look like your mother," he said softly. God rest her soul. She would have loved this. "Are the papers ready?" Elena asked, pulling on black leather gloves. "Everything is ready," Arthur said, standing up. "The Montgomerys think they're meeting a representative named Mr. Sassy. They have no idea Titan Holdings is a Vanderbilt subsidiary. And the divorce, my lawyers filed it at 9 this morning. But we filed in a different jurisdiction. We've cited fraud and emotional distress. We've frozen your joint accounts pending investigation." "They don't know yet," Elena pointed out. "They'll find out when their cards get declined at lunch." Arthur smirked. "But first, the meeting." Arthur walked over and placed his hands on her shoulders. "Elena, are you sure you want to do this? You don't have to be in the room. I can crush them for you." Elena adjusted her gloves. She thought of Beatrice's sneer. She thought of Carla's laughter. She thought of Mark signing the papers without looking at her. "No, Dad," she said coldly. "I want to see their faces. I want them to know exactly who they threw away." "Very well." Arthur offered his arm. "Let's take the company car." The conference room at Blackwood Corp was all glass and steel. Mark, Beatrice, and Carla sat on one side of the long table. They were nervous. This was the big leagues. "Stop fidgeting, Mark," Beatrice hissed. "You're wrinkling the suit. Where are they?" Mark checked his watch. "It's 10:02. "Power play," Carla whispered. "Making us wait to show they're in charge." "We are the Montgomerys," Beatrice said, though her voice wavered slightly. "We are partners, not beggars." Suddenly, the heavy double doors swung open. A team of 6 lawyers in matching charcoal suits walked in, placing thick binders on the table. They didn't speak. They just stood behind the empty chairs on the opposite side. Then a man announced from the doorway, "Please stand for the chairman of Vanderbilt Global and the CEO of Titan Holdings." Mark frowned. "Vanderbilt Global? I thought we were dealing with Blackwood." Beatrice turned pale. "Vanderbilt? That's Arthur Vanderbilt, the billionaire. Why is he involved?" Before they could process the name, Arthur Vanderbilt walked in. The room seemed to shrink around his presence. He didn't look at them. He walked to the head of the table and stood. "Gentlemen," Arthur said, his voice booming. "My daughter, Ms. Vanderbilt." Mark's breath hitched. He watched the doorway. A woman stepped in. The click of her red-bottomed heels echoed on the marble floor. She wore a blood-red suit that fit like a second skin. She radiated wealth, power, and danger. She walked to the chair directly across from Mark, set a familiar black leather folder on the table, and looked up. Mark's mouth fell open. Beatrice dropped her pen. Carla gasped audibly. It was Elena, but it wasn't the Elena they knew. This wasn't the waitress. This was a queen. "Hello, Mark," Elena said, her voice soft and cold as ice. "I believe we have some unfinished business, and I'm not talking about the dinner dishes." Mark scrambled to his feet, knocking his chair over. "Elena, What? What are you doing here? Who? Sit down, Mr. Montgomery, Arthur Vanderbilt barked. You are in the presence of my daughter, Elena Vanderbilt, sole heiress to the Vanderbilt empire. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of 3 worlds shattering at once. Elena smirked. Now, let's talk about this merger. Or should I say, acquisition. The air in the conference room was so thin, it felt like the oxygen had been vacuumed out. Mark Montgomery stared at the woman in the red suit. His brain couldn't reconcile the images. Elena, the waitress who wore oversized sweaters and made hot cocoa on rainy nights, and Elena Vanderbilt, the shark sitting across from him, with a gaze that could cut glass. Vanderbilt, Beatrice whispered, her face losing color until her foundation looked like a mask. She looked at Arthur, then Elena. This is a joke, a cruel prank. I assure you, Mrs. Montgomery, Arthur said, sitting at the head of the table and leaning back comfortably. My checkbook doesn't have a sense of humor. But you said your father was a mechanic, Mark blurted out, his voice cracking. You said he fixed cars in a shop in Queens. Elena didn't blink. She opened the leather folder in front of her. I said he fixes things. Sometimes he fixes broken engines. Sometimes he fixes broken companies, and sometimes... She paused, her eyes locking onto Mark's. He destroys things that can no longer be fixed. Why? Mark asked, gripping the edge of the table. Why did you lie to me for 2 years? I didn't lie, Mark. I omitted, Elena said calmly. I wanted to know if you loved me. Just Elena. Not the money. Not the jet. Not the empire. And for a while, I thought you did. She gestured to the empty space on her ring finger. But we all saw how that turned out. Now, if you're finished gasping, I have a company to acquire. Beatrice, ever the survivor, straightened her back. She forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Well, she smoothed her skirt. This is unexpected, but ultimately, it's good news. We're family, Elena. Technically, you're still a Montgomery until the paperwork is processed. This makes the merger even smoother. We can keep everything in the family. Arthur let out a dry, barking laugh. The audacity is impressive, lady. I'll give you that. We are here to discuss business, Elena interjected, silencing her father with a subtle hand gesture. You were under the impression that Titan Holdings wanted to merge with the Montgomery Group, that you would keep your board seats, and that you would receive a payout of $50 million. That was the agreement with the Blackwood reps, Carla said, trying to sound tough, but failing. The Blackwood reps were front men, Elena said. She pulled a document from the folder and slid it across the table. It spun perfectly, stopping right in front of Mark. The offer has changed. Mark looked at the document. His eyes went wide. $1? He whispered. Excuse me? Beatrice shrieked. She snatched the paper from Mark's hands. Acquisition price, $1. This is an insult. Our assets alone are worth $40 million. Your declared assets are worth $40 million, Elena corrected. But let's talk about your debts. Let's talk about the things you discuss at the dinner table when you think the help isn't listening. Elena tapped the table with a manicured nail. Point 1, she said. The factory in Vietnam. You've bypassed safety regulations for 3 years to save 15% on overhead. I remember you bragging about bribing the local inspector, Mark. You said, those people are lucky to have jobs. Who cares about ventilation? Mark turned gray. I have the dates recorded, Elena said coldly, and my father's investigators confirmed it this morning. If this goes public, your stock drops to 0 by noon, and you're headed for prison. Beatrice was shaking. You can't prove that. Point 2, Elena continued, ignoring her. The Cayman Island accounts. Carla, you love talking about your duty-free shopping. You've been funneling company profits into a shell company called Blue Sky Ventures to evade U.S. taxes. That's tax evasion. Federal prison. 5 to 10 years. Carla dropped her phone. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. And point 3, Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Your loans are maxed out. You owe the bank $20 million that's due next month. You were counting on this merger to pay it off. Without this deal, the Montgomery Group is bankrupt by February 1st. She leaned forward. So here is the new deal. Titan Holdings acquires the Montgomery Group for $1. We assume your debts. We take your assets. And the 3 of you walk away with no board seats, no golden parachutes, no company cars. You walk away with whatever is in your pockets. I won't sign this, Beatrice hissed, slamming her hand on the table. I built this company. I won't let some spiteful girl steal it from me. Elena stood up slowly. She looked 10 feet tall. Then don't sign. Walk out that door. But the second you do, I release the safety reports to the press. I send the tax files to the IRS, and I call the bank, which, by the way, my father controls, and tell them to call in your loans immediately. She checked her diamond watch. You have 5 minutes. After that, I destroy you. The silence stretched on, agonizing and brutal. Mark looked at his mother. Beatrice stared at the wall, her chest heaving. She realized she had been outplayed. She had treated Elena like a piece of furniture, and now the furniture was dropping a piano on her head. Mark, Beatrice whispered, her voice defeated. Sign it, Mark, Carla cried, her eyes full of tears. Sign it, or we go to jail. With a trembling hand, Mark picked up the pen. He looked at Elena one last time. He saw no love in her eyes, only the cold, hard reflection of his own mistakes. He signed the paper. Mark Montgomery. He pushed it toward her. Are you happy? He asked hoarsely. Elena took the document, blowing on the ink, just like Beatrice had told her to do the night before. Happy, Elena mused. No, Mark, I'm not happy. I'm pregnant, I'm divorced, and my child's father is a coward. But I am satisfied. She turned to Arthur. We're done here. Arthur stood, buttoning his jacket. A pleasure doing business. Security will escort you from the building. You have 1 hour to clear your personal belongings from your offices. Anything left behind becomes property of Titan Holdings. 1 hour! Carla shrieked. But my things, my paintings! Property of Titan, Arthur said, turning his back on them. As Elena walked toward the door, Mark lunged forward. Elena, wait! The baby! We have to talk about the baby! Elena stopped. She didn't turn around. Talk to my lawyers, Mark. But I'll warn you, custody battles are expensive. And as of 1 minute ago, she held up the signed contract. You're unemployed. The walk from the conference room to the elevators felt like a funeral procession for the Montgomerys. Security guards, burly men in Titan uniforms, flanked them, ensuring they touched nothing on their way out. This is a nightmare, Carla sobbed, clutching her designer bag. Mom, do something. Shut up, Carla, Beatrice snapped, though she looked like she was on the verge of fainting. I need to think. We need a strategy. We have no money, Mom, Mark shouted, hitting the elevator button violently. She took everything. She took the company. We have the name, Beatrice said, her eyes darting frantically. We have the Montgomery name, and we have the truth about the baby. If she wants to play dirty, we'll play dirtier. We'll go to the press. We'll tell our side. Vindictive billionaire heiress denies access to the father of her child. The public loves a victim, Mark. The elevator doors opened. They stepped out into the lobby of the Blackwood building. but Elena was 2 steps ahead of them. As the Montgomerys emerged from the elevator, a wall of flashes exploded. It was blinding. Dozens of reporters, cameramen, and journalists were packed into the lobby, held back by velvet ropes. "Mr. Montgomery, is it true? You forced your pregnant wife to sign divorce papers on Christmas Eve?" "Mrs. Montgomery, any comment on the fraud allegations?" "Mark, why did you leave the Vanderbilt heir?" Mark held up his hands to shield his eyes. "What? How do they know?" A reporter from the New York Post shoved a mic in his face. "We received a copy of the divorce agreement signed last night," the reporter shouted. "It specifies a $10,000 payout for irreconcilable differences. Did you really offer Elena Vanderbilt $10,000 to go away?" Beatrice pushed the mic away. "No comment. Move." But they were trapped. Another reporter, a woman from a major national network, stepped forward with a tablet. "We're live right now, Mr. Montgomery. Sources say you didn't know your wife was Arthur Vanderbilt's daughter. Did you marry her for love, or were you just disappointed she wasn't rich enough for you?" "I loved her," Mark shouted, losing his composure. "I didn't know who she was." "So you divorced her because she was poor," the reporter pressed. "And now that you know she's a billionaire, you regret it." The crowd laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. Beatrice grabbed Mark's arm. "Don't answer. Run!" They pushed through the crowd, cameras capturing every sweaty, terrified moment. They burst through the revolving doors onto the street, only to find their company car was gone. In its place was a tow truck. A man was hooking up the Montgomery executive limo. "Hey!" Mark shouted, running toward the driver. "That's my car. Put it down." The driver looked at a clipboard. "Order comes from the new owners, Titan Holdings. All company vehicles are to be recovered immediately." "I'm the CO," Mark started. "Not according to this," the driver said, continuing to lift the car. It started to rain, a cold, freezing drizzle. The Montgomerys stood on the sidewalk, shivering. Their coats were in the office upstairs, which they could no longer access. Passers-by stopped to record videos on their phones. Montgomery's broke was already trending on Twitter. Mark's phone buzzed. It was a notification from his banking app. "Alert, joint account frozen due to pending legal investigation." "Mom," Mark said, his voice shaking. "My cards are blocked." Beatrice checked hers. "Mine too." They were stranded in Manhattan in the rain, with no car, no money, and the entire world laughing at them. On the 40th floor, Elena watched the scene from the window. She had a cup of hot tea in her hands. Arthur stood by her side. "Brutal," he commented, watching the tow truck pull the limo away. "But necessary." "They cared so much about image," Elena said softly. "Now their image is the only thing they have left, and it's destroyed." "What now?" Arthur asked. "We have the company. We have the revenge. Do you want to go home?" Elena turned away from the window. She walked to the large table where the acquisition papers lay. "Not yet," she said. "Beatrice isn't finished. I know her. She's like a cockroach. She'd survive a nuclear blast and try to bite your ankle. She's broke, Elena. What can she do?" "She mentioned the baby," Elena said, her hand drifting to her stomach again. "She'll try to use the child as leverage. She'll sue me for custody. She'll try to paint me as an unfit mother, a mentally unstable rich girl who ran away." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Let her try. I'll bury her in mountains of legal paperwork for 50 years. "No," Elena said. "I don't want a legal battle that lasts years. I want it over permanently." She looked at her father. "I need you to organize a gala, the Vanderbilt New Year's Eve charity ball." "We usually hold that in Newport," Arthur noted. "This year, we're holding it here in Manhattan, and I want you to invite everyone, the press, the partners, the elite, and the Montgomerys." Arthur raised an eyebrow. especially the Montgomerys. Elena smiled coldly. Beatrice won't be able to resist. She'll think it's her chance to make a scene, to beg for mercy, or to try and blackmail me in public. She's addicted to the spotlight. And when she gets there, Elena said, I'll reveal the final secret. The one thing Mark doesn't know about why I really walked out of that coffee shop that day, 2 years ago. Arthur looked confused. I thought you walked out to find yourself. That's part of the story, Elena said. But there's more. Mark thinks he's a victim of a misunderstanding. At the ball, I'm going to show the world that the Montgomerys aren't just snobs, they're criminals, and I'm going to drive the final nail into the coffin on live television. You have a plan? Arthur asked. I have a video, Elena corrected. A recording from the security camera in their own dining room, the one they forgot was installed. Arthur smiled. It was a predatory shark smile. I'll send out the invitations. New Year's Eve in New York City is electric, but inside the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, the atmosphere was pure voltage. The Vanderbilt Gala was the event of the decade. Billionaires, senators, and A-list celebrities mingled under gold leaf ceilings, sipping champagne that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. Elena stood on the balcony overlooking the room. She wore a shimmering gold sequin gown that fell to her feet like liquid metal. It was a statement. She was no longer the grieving wife in navy blue, nor the vengeful CEO in crimson. She was the prize. She was the gold standard. They're here, Arthur said, appearing at her side. He adjusted his tuxedo cuffs. Security let them through the service entrance as you instructed. They believe they've snuck in. Do they look desperate? Elena asked, swirling her sparkling water. They look like drowning rats in designer clothes, Arthur replied. Beatrice is wearing a dress from 3 seasons ago. The horror. Elena smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Let's go down. It's almost midnight. Downstairs, the Montgomerys were huddled by the shrimp tower. They were out of place. While the other guests were relaxed and merry, Mark, Beatrice, and Carla were sweating, their eyes darting nervously. It's time, Beatrice whispered, grabbing a glass of wine she hadn't paid for. When the countdown starts, everyone will be looking at the stage. That's when we strike. We walk up there, grab the mic, and tell everyone that Arthur Vanderbilt is withholding his mentally unstable daughter and keeping her from her husband. Mom, look at her, Mark said. His voice was hollow. He was staring at the grand staircase. Elena was descending, arm in arm with her father. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. She was glowing. She looked untouchable. Mark felt a physical pain in his chest, not just regret for the money, but a sudden, stinging realization that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he had thrown her away for a merger that didn't exist. Focus, Mark, Beatrice hissed, pinching his arm. It's a charade. Remember the plan. As the clock ticked toward 11:50, the music dimmed. Arthur Vanderbilt stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed through the speakers. Thank you for joining us to welcome the new year. Before we start the countdown, my daughter Elena has a few words she'd like to say. Elena stepped to the microphone. The room fell silent. Thank you, she said. Her voice was clear and melodic. This year has been one of transition for me. I've learned that trust is expensive and loyalty is rare. I've learned that some people would burn you just to keep themselves warm. Liar! The scream ripped through the silence. Beatrice Montgomery pushed her way through the crowd, dragging Mark and Carla with her. She rushed the stage steps, her eyes wide. Security guards moved to intercept her, but Elena held up a hand. Let them speak. Beatrice grabbed the microphone stand. She looked at the sea of faces. Faces of people she wanted to impress. People she wanted to be. "This woman," Beatrice panted, pointing a trembling finger at Elena, "is a liar. She is my son's wife. She ran away after a nervous breakdown. She is pregnant with my grandson and is unfit to be a mother. She has deceived you all." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Phones went up, recording the meltdown. Mark stepped forward, looking at Elena with pleading eyes. "Elena, please, come home. We can fix this. Think of the baby." "The baby," Elena repeated, her face unreadable. "You care about the baby now, Mark? You didn't care much when you handed me divorce papers as a Christmas gift." "I didn't know," Mark cried. "If I had known." "If you had known I was a Vanderbilt, you mean," Elena finished. "She's twisting the truth," Beatrice shrieked. "She's unstable. We are the victims here. The Montgomerys are a respectable family." Elena looked at the technician in the sound booth and nodded. "Respectable," Elena mused. "Let's see." Behind her, a massive LED screen set up for the countdown flickered to life. But instead of a clock, it showed a grainy, high-definition video. It was the dining room of the Montgomery estate. The date in the corner said December 24th, 7 o'clock p.m. The crowd held its breath. It was the Christmas dinner. On screen, Beatrice was carving the turkey. Her voice boomed through the ballroom, crisp and clear. "Mark, honey, have you told her yet? Or must we pretend to enjoy this farce until dessert?" The audience watched with horrified fascination as the scene played out. They saw the envelope. They heard the insults. "You are a liability, Elena. A social anchor dragging my son to the bottom of the ocean." Mark closed his eyes on stage. He couldn't watch. But the video didn't stop at the signing of the divorce. It skipped to after Elena had walked out into the snow. The camera was still recording. On screen, Beatrice was drinking wine triumphantly. "Finally," the video Beatrice said, "now that the trash is gone, we can focus on the real issue, the audit. Mom, if the merger happens, the auditors will look at the books. They'll see the $2 million missing from the employee pension fund." The room gasped. In real life, Beatrice froze. On screen, Beatrice laughed. "Don't be stupid, Mark. We'll use the signing bonus from the Blackwood deal to fill the hole in the pension fund before anyone notices. And if they do notice," she paused, smiling wickedly, "we blame Elena. We say she had access to the accounts. Who are they going to believe? Us or the waitress?" The video cut to black. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Elena turned to Beatrice, whose face was now a mask of pure terror. "You were right about one thing, Beatrice," Elena said into the microphone. "The auditors did look at the books, my auditors, and they found the missing pension money and the transfers to the Caymans." Elena pointed to the back of the room. "I believe you know Commissioner Miller." The doors burst open. 4 New York State police officers marched in, followed by 2 agents from the IRS. "Beatrice Montgomery, Mark Montgomery, Carla Montgomery," the lead officer announced. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny." "It's a setup!" Beatrice screamed, backing away. "That video is a fake! Mark, do something!" But Mark was finished. He collapsed to his knees on the stage, burying his face in his hands. As the officers handcuffed Beatrice, she kicked and screamed, her dignity completely gone. Carla wept silently as she was led away. Mark was the last to be cuffed. He looked up at Elena. "I did love you," he whispered. "At the beginning, I really did." Elena looked down at him. There was no more hate in her eyes, only pity. "I know," she said softly. but you loved your mother's approval more. Goodbye, Mark." They were let out. Camera flashes popped like fireworks. Elena turned back to the crowd. The clock struck midnight. "Happy New Year," she said. And as the balloons fell and the crowd cheered, Arthur Vanderbilt put his arm around his daughter. "You did good, kid," he said. "You did good." The nursery in the Vanderbilt penthouse was painted a soft cloud gray. Outside, the first snowfall of the following winter was beginning to fall, dusting the rooftops of New York. Elena sat in the rocking chair, clutching a small bundle wrapped in a cashmere blanket. Arthur Vanderbilt, the man who made economies tremble, was currently making silly faces at the newborn. "He has your nose," Arthur whispered, for fear of waking the little one. "He has your chin," Elena smiled, stroking the baby's cheek. "Determination. What did you name him?" Arthur asked. "You haven't told me the middle name yet." "Leo," Elena said. "Leo Arthur Vanderbilt." Arthur's eyes misted over. He cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure. "Strong name. A good CEO's name." "He can be whatever he wants," Elena said firmly. "A CEO, a painter, a mechanic, as long as he's kind." "And what about them?" Arthur asked, his voice hardening slightly. "The trial ended yesterday," Elena said, looking out the window. "Beatrice got 15 years for fraud and embezzlement. Carla got 5. And Mark," she paused. "Mark got 8 years. He pleaded guilty. He sent a letter. Did you read it?" "No," Elena said. She looked at the fireplace, where a fire crackled warm and bright. "I burned it." She looked down at little Leo, who yawned, gripping her finger with his tiny hand. The Montgomerys were a memory, a faded scar. They had wanted a legacy, a name, a dynasty. In their greed, they had lost it all. And Elena, she had found the one thing money can't buy, and the one thing they had tried to take from her. She had a family. "Look at the snow, Leo," she whispered to her son. "It's clean. It's a fresh start." Arthur put a hand on her shoulder. "Dinner's ready. The chef made roast turkey." Elena laughed, a crystal clear, genuine sound. "Tell him to take it back," she said, standing up with her son in her arms. "I'm in the mood for pizza, food, and that is the ultimate revenge." The Montgomerys did not just lose their money. They lost their freedom and their honor. All because they couldn't see the value in the person standing right in front of them. Elena burned the letter, closing that chapter forever and choosing her son over the past. What do you think? Did Mark deserve a second chance, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Would you like me to create a visual storyboard for the key scenes of this story, such as the tense Christmas dinner or the dramatic reveal at the New Year's gala?